Okay, good evening. It's Monday, April 28th, and this is the information session for the affordable moderate income homes at St. Louis Schoolhouse in Fall River. Um, Good evening, everyone. Let me share my screen. I put together a little slideshow for tonight, which I'll go through. So let me get that started. Okay. Everyone see that all right? Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm going to go through it. I expect, depending on the number of questions that people have, this session will last anywhere from maybe 45 minutes on the low end, possibly closer to an hour. The session is recorded and we'll post it on our website. So if you have to leave early or if anyone is missing this, it'll be there later on. Should be there by tomorrow. I am happy to, let me just change my name here so you can see it. It's not letting me do it. It's okay. So yeah, it'll be up there by tomorrow. I'm going to go through. If at any point people have questions, this session is for you, so feel free to ask. And also at the end, I'll stop and just take questions. So if you prefer to just listen, look at the slides, we can do that. And then if you have questions later, happy to take those. So let me give you a little bit of background. Oh, and before Kevin Mapp, are you here by chance? I can't remember if you were coming or not. Okay, I don't see Kevin. Kevin's the developer, but that's okay. So this is an opportunity for 18 affordable to moderate income condominium units. There are there are 1-bedroom units and 2-bedroom units, and the units are being made available at different area median income, also known as AMI tiers. So we have four 1-bedroom, 80% AMI condos selling for $188,508 with, here's the condo fees, $247 a month. There are 5 1-bedroom, 100% AMI condos selling for $233,213. Slightly higher condo fees of $329 a month. 5 2-bedroom, 80% condos for $212,075. Condo fees of $278 a month. And 4 2-bedroom, 100% AMI condos for $262,520 for $369 a month. We'll talk soon about income and asset limits and qualifying, but let me just say now, when you fill out an application, you can apply for all of these bedroom sizes and options or only one or more than one, 2 or 3, whatever you're interested in. There's no downside to doing that. Worst case scenario, we may come back to you and say, you know what, you actually make, as an example, you make too much money to qualify for an 80% unit, but it looks like you qualify for a 100% unit, so we'll enter you into the lottery for one of the 100% units. But that's no downside to you. There's no cost or penalty to applying for more. So if you think that you could be interested in any of these units, possibly, I recommend applying for, all bedroom sizes at all AMI tiers rather than being more selective. Again, the worst thing that happens if you apply for more is we might say you're not eligible. But if you only apply for, say, the 1-bedroom 80%, just as an example, and later on you say, you know what, actually a 2-bedroom sounds pretty good, that's a little bit harder to fix, if the lottery application period's already closed. So better to be over-inclusive rather than under-inclusive. The application deadline to submit your lottery application is May 20th, so a little less than a month away. The application itself, if you've seen it already, is not that long. I expect you might be able to fill it out in less than, say, maybe 30 minutes, maybe a little more. But the time-consuming piece is getting a mortgage pre-approval. So if you're interested in this opportunity and you have not begun that process, I highly recommend getting started with a lender. And when you do so, it's really preferable, although not required, to use a lender who has experience with affordable housing and who has affordable housing products. And there's actually a link in our information packet where you can find a whole list of lenders in Massachusetts that are participating in the MHP1 program. That's a wonderful program. You're not required to go there, but it certainly ensures that you're going with a lender who generally understands affordable housing and is more likely to be able to offer you a product that's going to work. As we'll talk about a little bit more during this presentation, there are deed riders that get recorded with the closings of these units that restrict or place certain restrictions on your use of the unit and the resale of the unit. And not every mortgage product will accept those terms. So you'll want to make sure that the lender is aware of those, and the information packet speaks about that as early as possible in the process. They will become aware of it eventually. You don't want them to be surprised by it and later say, oh no, I didn't realize there was this deed rider that was going to get filed, and actually that presents a problem, and now you're scrambling because you thought you were going to be moving towards closing and now your financing is falling through. So the earlier you can show these restrictions to them and make sure that they understand and make sure that they're offering you a product that's going to work with those, the better. Now, some of you watching may have already been on our website, sebhousing.com, and found this opportunity and read about it and seen some of the documents there. There's this cool link that the marketing team for the sales team has created right here. I just clicked on it and it brings you straight to the page. So this is our SEB Housing website, and specifically the St. Louis Schoolhouse page, because we do have other properties we work with. This will bypass those other ones and take you straight to St. Louis Schoolhouse. You can open up and download the information packet right there, where you can read all sorts of details about the program. I'm not sure why it's getting stuck on that page. Hopefully that's just some weird one-off, but I'll check that after this. You can get the application. Again, you can download it, fill it out, submit it to us. There's also these different, so I mentioned, I think earlier, there's 2 deed riders that ultimately would get filed at the time of the closing on these units. One is the affordability deed rider and the other is the shared appreciation deed rider. Those are pretty, what's the word I want? Those are legal documents and they're pretty lengthy and they have a lot of details. Probably easier to start with the summary, which gives a much higher level review and is much more easily digestible. That's where I would look. And this disclosure form too does sort of the same thing, more of a summary overview. Certainly you can look through the deed riders, and if you're serious about this opportunity, you should. But ultimately, if you're going to move forward on one of these, you'll want to review those with an attorney to make sure that you fully understand the restrictions on the unit, including how you use it. You got to use it as your principal residence, as we'll talk about, and how you can resell it and what the restrictions are there. You can see some photos here. See a bit of an overview, income limits, key dates. We'll talk, so that's all on our website, and we'll sort of review those things during this session. But the website's a good resource if you haven't been there yet. Before we get into more details about the opportunity, I just want to take a minute to tell you about who we are and our role in this process. So my name is David Cashman. Sorry, I should have said that at the beginning. And I work for SEB Housing. And we are an affordable housing lottery compliance agency based in Needham, Mass. We work with developers and management teams and sales teams all over the state of Massachusetts and occasionally in other states too. We're not the sales team. We're not a real estate broker. We're not the developer. We're not the contractor or builder. We're the affordable housing compliance group, and we get hired by developers and management teams at various projects with affordable components around the state. And in this case, we were hired by the developer to help them with the 18 affordable condo units here. And our chief sort of role in doing that is to market the opportunity. We create the information packet, we create the application. We worked closely with the monitoring agent in Mass Housing, who's the program administrator, to make sure that the information packet and application reflected accurately all the details and requirements of the program. And we are ultimately will run a lottery. We will qualify buyers to make sure that they're eligible for the program, which is something we're going to talk about at a high level in a minute here. And then ultimately, for households who move forward after the lottery, we'll work with the household and we'll work with the sales team to make sure that the household meets the various steps as they move up towards closing. We are definitely your main point of contact right now and up until the lottery. And after the lottery, we'll stay involved, but the developer and their sales team will also play a more active role after that, because they will be the ones meeting with buyers, showing units, taking reservations, taking deposits, coordinating the signing of the purchase and sale agreement, and ultimately working with the buyer on setting the closing dates and closing on the unit. Here's our email, here's our phone number. Email is the best way to get in touch with us. You can definitely call us too. Given the volume of calls that we get, a lot of times we don't answer, but leave a message and we get back within 1 business day. Got to leave your name and phone number, and we have a call log, and our admin team is super diligent about getting back to people, but please don't just hang up if you don't reach us. Do leave your name and phone number, and you will get a call back. A little bit of background here, and let me just say candidly, we're in Needham. I don't have firsthand knowledge of this. I haven't been there. I haven't been on site, but these are the details I have. If you have questions about additional details, I can get those for you from the developer. And certainly for households who end up moving forward after the lottery, you'll have the chance to not only meet with the sales team, but also visit the project and see the actual units and really see what this community has to offer. But broadly speaking, units are being offered in 1 and 2 bedroom layouts, all have 1 bathroom. The 1 bedroom units range in size from a little over 500 square feet to a little over 900 square feet. The 2 bedrooms are a little over 800 square feet to 1,026 square feet. Some of the unit details include LED recessed lighting, or smart Wi-Fi switches, mini split AC units, on-demand hot water. I guess they have video doorbells, high-end countertops, and all units have an in-unit washer and dryer. Some community amenities include bike storage. There's a security camera system, mail and storage room, trash chute system, which is pretty cool. There's a conference room and co-working space, an elevator, and each unit gets a parking space. And obviously this is some of you probably know this building far, far better than I do. It's a historic building. It's been around for many, many years. There's some really cool sort of historic details, high vaulted ceilings, things that are being preserved, but also some really, nice new finishing touches. The whole thing's been gut renovated. And from the pictures I've seen, they appear to be beautiful units. Just north of just north of John F. Kennedy Park. Looks like it's a short drive to I-195, walking distance to various restaurants, Taunton River, and less than a mile from City Hall. And in case you're curious, these units are part of the Commonwealth Builder Program, which is administered by a quasi-public agency called Massachusetts Housing Financing Agency, Mass Housing for short. And basically they provide funding to the developer to allow people who qualify, more moderate income buyers, to buy units at a discounted rate. That is the goal of this program. So let's talk a little bit about obviously these sales prices are less than they otherwise would be if the units were unrestricted. And in order to get the advantage of one of these great units at one of these lower sales prices, you have to qualify for the program. Broadly, there are a few eligibility criteria. One is that all household members have to be first-time home buyers, which means no one in the household can have owned a home in the past 3 years. No one in the household can have owned a home in the past 3 years. There are a few exceptions for that, including for single parents and those who have worked primarily without compensation in the home, taking care of the home and kids and stuff like that. And also for folks who may have owned a home that wasn't compliant with state and local building codes and can't be brought back into compliance for less than what it would cost to just buy a new home. That one doesn't come up very often that I've seen. Typically the exceptions are for parents and those who have been working as homemakers. Even in those cases, if you qualify for one of those exceptions, you do have to have sold the home or have your name off the deed at the time of application for the lottery. So even if you're a single parent and therefore you qualify for the exception to the first-time homebuyer rule, you would have to have sold your home or gotten your name off the deed to the home at the time you're applying for the lottery. The next major eligibility criteria is that you have to have income and assets that are below the program maximums. And I've listed what those are right here. As you can see, they're based on household size, not based on bedroom size. So as an example, if you're a one-person household and you're interested in an 80% AMI unit, the income limit that's applicable to you is $64,050. And that's true whether you're applying for a one-bedroom unit or a two-bedroom unit. Now, in theory, if you were a one-person household and made, say, $62,000, just making up a number here, you would qualify for an 80% unit, at least in terms of meeting the income limit criteria. You have to meet all the criteria, but you would be under this number, and so you've satisfied that requirement. If you could get a mortgage pre-approval for a 100% AMI unit, in theory, you could qualify for that unit too, because you're under 80,000. Now, obviously, if you can buy a unit at 80%, you're probably going to want to do that because it costs less money. But just putting it out there in case you don't have a high lottery position and you couldn't get an 80% unit because you don't have a high, they all get bought by households who are higher in the lottery ranking. In theory, you could still qualify for a 100% unit if you could get a mortgage pre-approval that would cover that cost. There is a household asset limit of $150,000. It doesn't apply to households who are getting housing assistance, like if you're getting a rental voucher right now, that asset limit doesn't apply. And also, there are carve-outs up to $250,000 of any federally recognized retirement savings program. The first $250,000 does not get counted. So if you had, for example, $400,000, let's just say you've been saving for a long time for retirement, you have $400,000 in your company's 401k, the first $250,000 does not get counted. The next $150,000 does get counted towards the asset limit. And again, the asset limit is $150,000. Unlike income limits, it's not based on household size. So the asset limit is $150,000, whether you're a household size of 1, 2, 3, 4. You must be pre-approved for a mortgage. As I said at the beginning, a mortgage pre-approval is required with your lottery application. We cannot enter you into the lottery without one. So if you're interested in this opportunity, because that's probably the most time-consuming piece of the application, recommend that you get started on that right away. And lastly, you cannot have a financial interest in the development or be a related party. This is not something that comes up particularly often, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But if you're, the brother or sister of the builder, that McPherson development, that would present a problem. Let me spend a little bit more time here just talking about income and assets. So income is any monies received or earned by the household members. So it can include, obviously, the one that comes most readily to mind is your wages, as reflected in your pay stubs, or your profit and loss statement if self-employed. Income, I should note, is your gross income, your pre-tax income, what your salary is, or what you make hourly if you're not salaried, not your after-tax amount. It's your gross income. But if you're self-employed, it's your net income after you account for business operating costs. And you would have to fill out a profit and loss statement eventually to show what those are, with receipts and other documentation to show the money coming into the business, as well as the money going out, or the operating costs of the business, the cost of supplies, the cost of paying people, the cost of renting space, etc. Income can include benefits, unemployment, Social Security, child support. It can also include things like periodic payments from friends or family. Now, one-time or very infrequent payments would not count, but if it has any type of regularity to it, that counts as income. When you complete the lottery application, take a minute and spend some time going through the chart that asks you about what your income is. It has a lot of different sources that can all count as income in this program. Some of those are things that you probably think, oh yeah, of course, that's income. I was thinking of that. But some of them may not be. There may be things on there, like I'm just, say child support. Not everyone thinks of that as income. In certain programs or circumstances, maybe it doesn't count, but in this program it does. So take some time to go through that application and the chart that asks about your income, and make sure you go through all those categories and make sure you're not missing anything. You don't want to accidentally underreport what your income is. Fine, maybe that gets you into the lottery, but ultimately after the lottery, if you're invited to move forward, you're going to have to produce income, asset, and tax documents and bank statements. And if there's other money coming in, chances are we're going to see it and have to ask about it. And it's a shame if you thought, oh, geez, I didn't realize that counts as income, and it actually puts me over the limit. So it's to your benefit to spend some time on that chart to make sure you don't miss anything. Assets, as I mentioned, $150,000 asset limit. It does include gifts or funds you will use towards down payment. That's a question we get with some regularity, like, hey, I have some money saved up and I'd like to use my $40,000 towards the purchase of this home. Do I have to include that as my asset since it's just going to go towards the home? And the answer is yes. As I mentioned, doesn't apply to current recipients of HUD rental assistance or residents of federally assisted public housing. I talked about the IRS recognized retirement plans, first $250,000 not counting. Other examples of assets are checking or savings accounts, certificates of deposit that you might have a bank where you put the money in and you can't get it for 6 months or a year. Net value of stocks, bonds that you might hold, cash apps like Venmo and PayPal that operate much like bank accounts do. You'd have to provide Venmo and PayPal statements showing what's in the account. I should note that income generated by assets does count towards the income limit. So if you have an asset that generates income regularly, that gets counted towards that income limit that we talked about. Any questions so far? Okay. So if you're interested in this opportunity, get that lottery application in. Let me talk about what happens next. So if you're eligible, we will put you into the lottery. If you're eligible, you'll get a notice, an eligibility letter. Sorry about the sun here. It's sort of glaring in. Let's see if I can fix that. Make it a little better. You'll get a lottery application number, and it'll be in the form of A. blank blank blank. The purpose of that number is just to create an anonymous identifier to be used in the lottery, so that when we're doing the lottery, which is held publicly via Zoom, much as this is being done, we're not calling out, hey, James Smith and Susie White and whatever. We're not using your name because people may want to be anonymous. We're just using your number, A.001, A.005, etc. Those numbers don't mean anything. Like if you're A.001, that doesn't mean you're number one in the lottery. It doesn't say anything about your chances or when you'll get picked or anything like that. It just means you were the first household to submit a complete lottery application. And if you're the second household to submit a complete lottery application to us, you'll be A.002. But there's no meaning beyond that. You'll also get a documents requirements guide. This is a guide that will tell you, here are all the things that you're going to need to produce to demonstrate your income and assets and your eligibility after the lottery if you're invited to move forward. For purposes of running the lottery, we can take it on faith. Whatever you tell us your income and assets are, we'll just say, okay, you say you make $50,000 and you have $72,000 in assets. Looks like you meet the requirements. We'll put you into the lottery. The program doesn't permit us to just take you at face value before you buy a home. We have to actually look into it and verify it. So you're going to have to produce, for better or worse, a lot of financial documents so that we can see what and verify what your income and assets are. And so we'll be looking at things like your pay stubs and your taxes and 1099s and bank statements and other things. So that guide that you get is going to prep you for, okay, here are all the things I'm going to need to provide if I get that invitation forward after the lottery. And so it's in your best interest to start collecting some of those things because there's a lot. And after the lottery, if you get that invite, it's not going to be a open-ended, you can just submit this whenever you get around to it or feel like it. You're going to have a time limit, about 2 weeks, to submit it all, which if you're busy and working and doing other things may be kind of tight. So the more work you can do up front to have those documents in a folder ready to go, the easier your life will be if and when you get that invite after the lottery. The lottery date is June 3rd, 6 p.m. Again, just like this, it'll be via Zoom. You don't have to attend, and every applicant will be notified of the results at the same time. We send out an email to everyone with the results of the lottery. And frankly, just to give a heads up, when we do the lottery, we put in every single household who is eligible for the lottery, regardless of what bedroom size they applied for and regardless of what AMI tier, and regardless of other priority categories that people may have. So we just lump everyone in there, we pull the numbers out, and then we sort them onto different waiting lists. So there's some sorting that happens after. And what that means is that when you're actually watching the lottery drawing, and frankly, when I'm doing it, I don't know exactly where everyone's going to land on the waiting list because there's more sorting that needs to be done. It is generally better to be picked earlier in the lottery rather than later, but the order that you're picked isn't going to correspond necessarily exactly to where you'll be on the waiting list, which is to say, if you're drawn first, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll be first on the waiting list. And if you're drawn last, it doesn't necessarily mean you'll be last on the waiting list because there are other priorities and things we have to look at when sorting the results. As an example of some of those preference or priority categories that can impact waiting list placement, For 12 of the 18 units, 3 from each category, 3 meaning 3 one-bedroom 80%, 3 two-bedroom 80%, 3 one-bedroom 100%, 3 two-bedroom 100%, there will be a local preference. That means that households who live or work or have kids attending the Fall River school system will get a priority on those lists as compared to households who don't qualify for local preference. There is also a preference for households that the program calls disproportionately impacted households. There are 3 separate ways to qualify for this. You don't have to meet all 3, you only have to meet 1. So households with annual income below 80% AMI. That functionally means that any household who qualifies for an 80% unit is a disproportionately impacted household, which sort of makes that category moot for the 80% units. It really sort of then just applies to the 100% AMI units. But households making less than 80% AMI, that's one way to qualify as a disproportionately impacted household. Households who live in a qualified census tract, QCT. In the application, I've tried to lay out really clearly what that means and how to figure it out. So there's a link. You click on the link, you're going to enter some information about where you live. It's going to pull up a map, and it'll show in a pin the address that you've entered, and it'll have shading in purple. And if you're in that purple, that means you live in a QCT, and if you're not in the shaded purple, you don't. The application has instructions on this. Hopefully it's clear. Try and do it. If you're not clear, don't worry about it. Just list your address. We'll do it for you. I don't want anyone spending too much time on this and getting frustrated. Hopefully it's not too complicated with the instructions, but if you're doing it and saying, geez, Dave, I don't understand how to do this. I don't know if I live in this. You can check the box that says unsure. We'll do it for you. And then the third way to qualify as a disproportionately impacted household is to live in a gateway city. There are 29 cities and towns. I'm not going to list all of them because you can just read them right in the information packet and application. But if you live in one of them, you would meet the disproportionately impacted household category in that way. Again, you just have to meet it one way, not all 3 ways. And again, the relevance of this is that being either local preference or being a disproportionately impacted household can help you have a higher waiting list position when we do the lottery. Now you might be asking, what is a higher waiting list position? What is this guy talking about? Aren't there just winners and losers in the lottery? The answer to that is no. There aren't winners and losers. Every single person who's eligible for the lottery gets entered into the lottery. And the lottery just becomes a way of creating an order that households will get invited to move forward in the next step of the process. Essentially, the order in which you might have the opportunity to buy a unit. So if you're number 1 on, say, the one-bedroom 80% AMI list, you're going to have the first opportunity potentially to buy one of those units. And again, there will be more than one waiting list because there's a list for the one-bedroom 80% units, there's a list for the two-bedroom 80% units, there's a list for the one-bedroom 100% units, and there's a list for the two-bedroom 100% units. So there'll be multiple waiting lists. Households may be on some or potentially even all of those lists if they qualify for all of them. But again, nobody wins or loses anything at the lottery. It's just sort of figuring out where you fall compared to everyone else when you might get a chance to move forward. If you indicated that you have local preference or that you're a disproportionately impacted household in your lottery application, you don't have to provide any evidence of that now, much like you don't have to provide evidence about your income and assets with your lottery application. But later, after the lottery, if you're invited to move forward, you will need to provide evidence like a lease or a car registration or a renter's insurance or some type of bill, cell phone bill, landline bill, gas bill, electric, whatever, showing where you live and how you meet that category. Any questions so far? Okay, great. Okay, so what happens after the lottery? Well, The night of the lottery, we'll send around an email, like I mentioned, with the waiting lists and some additional information about how the lottery was drawn and what the next steps are. The top households will probably by the next day get an invitation saying, hey, remember that documents requirements guide that we sent you with your lottery application? Well, now you're being invited to move forward. Please go ahead and submit the income and asset and tax documentation that we now need to verify your eligibility. Hopefully you have that file or folder ready, and that is a smooth and relatively easy process. I should note the vast majority of households don't submit a 100% complete file on the first try. And that's because even if you do submit everything that's asked for, sometimes the things that you submit raise additional questions. Let me give you an example. You submit your bank statements as required, and we're looking through them, and we say, okay, we know that you have a job at X, and we know you get paid every 2 weeks, and we know how much you get paid, but there seems to be this other money going into your bank statements that we've seen from the last 3 months, and we don't know what that's from. So, hey, can you tell us what that money is from? Do you have another job that you didn't tell us about, or what is that source of income? Or was it just someone paying you back for dinner or whatever? Oftentimes, even if you've given us everything that's asked for in the guide, it can raise other questions, which is to say, the earlier you can get us everything, the better. So you have time to submit additional documents if anything's missing. There is what is called a monitoring agent involved in this project. They are basically the checker. So SEB Housing is the lottery agent. We're doing the lottery. We're answering questions. We're doing the check of your income and assets. But as a level of security blanket or redundancy, there is another group who goes by the shorthand CHAPA. And once we've approved a household and said, okay, we've checked, this household and they've submitted all the things that we need and they're eligible, we then have to send that file to CHAPA. They take a look at it. In most cases, they say, yeah, SEB, you got everything. It looks good. They can move forward in the process. Sometimes they say, oh, looks like you forgot to ask about that. I have a question. Rare that they would say, we don't know why you found them eligible. They're not eligible. It can happen. Theoretically, it doesn't happen much, but ultimately, they're the ultimate decider. So if they disagree with us, we could say yes and they could say no. Fortunately, that doesn't happen very often at all, but we do need their approval. Once you get CHAPA approval, then we put you in touch with the sales team. You can make an appointment with them to go visit the building, see the available units that you're on the waiting list for. You would then choose a unit, and the advantage of being higher on the waiting list is that you're going to have more choice of units, right? So if you're the number one household on, say, the one-bedroom 80% list, you're going to be able to choose from any of the one-bedroom 80% units. Once you sign a reservation for that unit, that one gets taken out of the pool, and the next household can engage in that process, the second household on the waiting list, but they would just have, however many, not that one to choose from. That one is taken out of the pool, the one that the first household chose. So being higher just gives you a little bit more choice of unit. You have to put down a $500 refundable deposit with your reservation agreement within usually about 10 days, but you'll work it out with the sales team. Sign a purchase and sale agreement, which time you'll put down 1.5% of the sales price minus the $500 deposit that you already put down. Usually the purchase and sale agreement, not always, will set a date for closing and a date by which you got to get your mortgage commitment. You'll then want to work with the bank to get that mortgage commitment. It's usually easiest if you just go and work with the bank that you got the mortgage pre-approval from, but it's not required. In theory, you could change if you're not happy with them or it's not going to work with them for whatever reason. And then ultimately, hopefully everything goes smoothly. You'll close on the home. There is a final review with SEB that you will have to do, which will happen after you get your mortgage commitment. And that's because you do have to maintain program eligibility all the way up through closing. So in theory, and this does happen sometimes, not often, at the time after the lottery that we do our initial review, you might be eligible. But maybe in the next couple months before you've closed on the home, you switch jobs and you get a big pay raise. Well, that's great, but if it puts you over the income limit, you might no longer qualify. And when we do that second review after you get your mortgage commitment, usually about a month before you close on the unit, we might say, hey, congrats on the new job. Looks like you make, a lot more money now, but now you actually don't qualify for the program. We're really sorry. We can't move you forward. So keep in mind, you have to maintain eligibility all the way up through closing. Now, if you get a new job a month after you've closed on the unit, now you own the unit. There's no more reviews. There's no more checking. There's no more verifying income or assets. You own the unit. So if you come into more money after you own it, that's all the better for you. But before, it could derail you if it puts you over, the income limit or the asset limit, or otherwise disqualifies you in some other way. Okay, so just going to give a little bit of a summary here. There are restrictions. There's going to be 2 deed riders that get recorded at the closing. And they place certain restrictions on you, the buyer's right to sell, rent, or refinance the home. And in some cases, may require you, the buyer, to share with Mass Housing some of the proceeds from the sale of the home. The first one is called the affordability deed rider, and it really applies for the first 15 years of ownership after you close on the unit. The home must be your primary residence, and you cannot rent it without getting approval from CHAPA. And they're only going to give you that approval if there's some compelling set of circumstances where you say, I have to rent the home, I can't live there right now. I don't know what that would be, but suffice it to say, these units are not meant so that people can turn around and start Airbnb-ing them and using them as an investment property to make money. That's not what this program is for. It's not allowed. Got to be your primary residence. The home can only be sold to another moderate income or affordable first-time home buyer, and for a limited sales price. So again, it would have to be someone else who meets the requirements of the program. Those income limits will change every year going forward. They get set by HUD every year. So the limits that apply today will be different in 2026 and again in 2027 and so on and so forth. But in those first 15 years of ownership, if you go to sell the home, the person you sell it to is going to have to qualify for the program. But I should note that transfers to immediate family members are allowed, and in those cases, they would not have to necessarily meet the program eligibility criteria. And there are restrictions on refinances and second mortgages. You have to get approval from CHAPA again. You want to make sure that you're not financing more than 97% of the price of the home. Now, I said years 15 through 30. It should say years 16 through 30. Sorry. So then after the affordability deed rider runs out after the first 15 years of ownership, then kicks in the shared appreciation deed rider. Again, that's years 16 through 30. Sorry about that. The home must still be your primary residence, and you still cannot rent it without approval. And there are still restrictions on refinances and second mortgages, but you, the owner, may sell the home to anyone, whether they meet the program restrictions or not. And there's no restriction on the sales price. So you can sell it for whatever the market dictates. But there are certain proceeds that you may need to pay over to Mass Housing if you end up selling it for above a certain amount. So just to give a little bit of an example here, and by that certain amount, I'll talk about that in a minute. So here we are again, years 1 through 15. We're in the affordability deed rider period. The maximum price that you could sell the home for to another eligible buyer would be the lesser of whatever the buyer is willing to pay you and you're willing to accept, or B, the initial purchase price plus 5% formula appreciation. So every year you're adding 5% and it's compounded. So it's Whatever it is today, 5% more, then 5% more of that, then 5% more of that. So it's not just a simple 5%, it's compounded. There's an allowance for capital improvements and for necessary marketing expenses. Capital improvements are things that are necessary major repairs. So it's not like, hey, I'd like to just, redo my cabinets with this super high-end cabinetry, or I want to change out the floors for this really cool new flooring. You can, assuming the condo association allows that, and I would assume something like that they would, you can do that. Okay, you can do that, but you just wouldn't necessarily get credit for it in terms of when you're trying to resell the unit. You may not be able to recoup that investment. So that's B. And then C, the price that is affordable to a buyer at whatever the AMI tier is of your home. So 80% or 100%. You don't need to get into the weeds on this necessarily. It's something for down the road. It's just a good thing to kind of have in mind. At some point, you may sell the place, and having some idea of like, what could I get for this place? Well, suffice it to say, you can't, in years 1 through 15, you can't just flip the unit for whatever the market would allow you to sell it for. You're going to have this formula that's going to say, here's the most you can get for it. And you don't have to worry about calculating that. CHAPA will do it. So this is more just if you're, for your own edification, if you're curious, when they're doing it and saying, all right, buyer, now you want to be a seller, you want to sell the unit, here's the most you can sell it for. But you don't have to necessarily, you're not going to have to do that work, and you don't even have to understand that if you don't, if you're not concerned about it. You can just say, okay, whatever you say. I have an example here straight from the info packet, but say you have a 100% AMI 2-bedroom unit initially purchased for $210,000 in 2024. I don't think this is not the actual price, so just making a price up here. So don't use this price. This is just for illustrative purposes. 5 years later, in 2029, you're going to sell the unit, and a buyer says, well, I'd pay you $295,000 for that unit. That's A. That's what the buyer would agree to pay. Or what's B? You have the initial purchase price of $210,000 plus the 5% compounded annually. That's about $58,000. Let's say you did a major capital improvement. You're trying to think what that would be. Probably nothing, hopefully, but the siding on your unit, something happened, it was leaking, and you had to redo an entire side of your unit that faced the exterior. Again, hopefully this is never going to happen. I'm sure it won't, but just for illustrative purposes, you're going to get some credit for that because you had to do it, and you told CHAPA about it, and they said, of course you have to do that. You'll get credit for that. You can get credit for $33,448. So you add all those together, $301,000 and change. But CHAPA is also going to look at this resale price calculator and figure out what could another affordable buyer making 80% or 100% income actually afford. And again, there's a calculator for this. You don't need to get to be too concerned with it. And they say, well, actually, the most a buyer for a 100% unit could afford would be $288,000. Anything more than that would be unaffordable to them. Well, in this case, $288,000 is the least of the three. It's less than $301. It's less than $295. That would be your maximum resale price. And in years 16 through 30, the maximum price is unrestricted. Like I said, sell it for whatever a buyer is willing to pay. However, there is shared appreciation, which is 50% of the resale price minus the baseline resale price, which is the initial sales price increased by 5% per year, plus capital improvement credit and necessary marketing expenses. Again, you don't have to know how to do this. CHAPA will let you know, but just for your own edification, if you're trying to figure out, hey, if I buy one of these units, what could I actually get for it down the road? What should I expect? As an example, say you have an 80% one-bedroom unit, initially purchased for $150,000 in 2024. Again, I know that's not the price, just for illustrative purposes. Unit is later being sold 20 years later, a buyer says, I'm willing to pay you $300,000 for that unit. That place is awesome. I would love to live there. It's beautiful. What do you think? You say, yeah, it's great. Chapa does the calculation, initial sales price, 5% a year, capital improvement credit, necessary marketing expenses. Says, well, the most you could sell it based on the formula is 250,000. You're trying to sell it for 300,000. The formula would say 250 is the max. In this case, that's obviously 50,000 more. You have to give 50% to mass housing, so 25,000, but you get to keep that extra 25,000 as profit. These examples are in the information packet. I recognize this is probably a lot to digest and quickly in this forum. So if you're scratching your heads going like this is a little bit complicated, don't worry about it. You don't have to actually understand it at all. If you want to spend more time with it, take a look at the info pack. You can take a look at the riders and the summaries online. They provide some very useful information on this. And ultimately, if you end up moving forward, you should really actually just sit down with your attorney, and they can sort of talk you through it to make sure you understand it. And let me just talk about this, and then I think we're going to wrap it up. But buyer restrictions. So, and I think I mentioned this already, so I'll go quickly. Years 1 through 15, got to be another income qualified first-time home buyer. And there's preferences for disproportionately impacted households. Again, you're not going to be doing the figuring out of who's going to buy it, so you don't have to worry about that. Chapa will do it. In years 16 through 30, there are no buyer restrictions. So you could sell it to whomever is willing to buy it, including someone who maybe owns a home or makes a lot of money or has a lot in assets or isn't qualified for the program in any other way. You can sell it. You're unrestricted. There is a purchase option at either time held by the city or mass housing. I think it's unlikely they would exercise it, but technically they have the right to buy it if they wanted to. That's it. I've been talking straight for 53 minutes. Does anyone have any questions? I hope this was a good overview. I'm happy to answer questions if anyone has any.
David, there's a question in the chat. I don't know if you saw.
Oh, no, sorry. Why don't I see the chat? Maybe because I'm sharing.
It says, can you explain the AMI levels again and how that works to determine your eligibility?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so AMI is the area median income, and it's set by HUD every year. Comes out in April. So it's based on your household size. So if you're, say, a two-person household, you can see right here, you can make up to $73,200 and be eligible for an 80% unit. You can make up to $91,440 and be eligible for a 100% AMI unit. Does that explain it? Sorry, I still can't seem to see the chat. I'm not sure why. But if the person feels comfortable unmuting, or Mindy, have they responded?
Yeah, no, but I think that was good. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions?
That was perfect.
Oh, good. Anything else? And we're not going anywhere. So, if you have a question later and you want to email us or call us, we're happy to take questions, whatever they are. We want you to go in feeling like an informed buyer. It's an awesome opportunity. And we'll be around for a long time and really happy to take whatever questions people may have.
David, as people are going through the application process, if they have questions as they're filling out and going through the process, what's the best way for them to ask questions?
The best way is to, I would say, list your questions, get a running list. Once you have all of them, email, the info@sebhousing.com. It's right in the application. It's in the info packet. That is the best way. If you want to call, leave a message, and we will call you back and we can go through each of your questions.
Awesome,
Any other?
thanks.
Yeah. And now I can finally see the chat. Sorry about that. Any other questions? All right. Well, I hope to see some more applications coming in. Thank you for attending the session. I hope it was helpful. And I hope everyone has a great night.
It was wonderful, David. Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Don. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. Good night, everyone. Take care.